Well, I wanted to touch on interesting things as they happen. First thing on the second round, one of these event cards, Peasant Revolt, Bourchier to Pleshy. So that means the leader Bourchier, unless he wants to play a writ and send someone else, has to go. Let's see if I can find him. He's probably hiding somewhere. White Gates, here he is. He has to go back to Pleshy. Paul to Wingfield. Well, and this is some of the randomness of the game. He's there. Earl of Essex to Colchester. Now I have to look and see, do I have the Earl of Essex? He's not out. And the Marshal, whoops, has to go to Malden. And that leaves poor Hastings behind, ready to be assassinated, essentially. Where's Malden? It's got to be up here in this area somewhere. There it is. All right, now, when you get one of these in the advanced game, there's a chance you're dead. And these count as raid or revolt. So it's going to be for a 2 for each leader, and I'll start from the top with Bourchier, Paul, and the Marshal. And that's all that happens, but you can see these are the kind of things that break apart your big stacks and make it possible to go slam someone, which is kind of an interesting factor. So now, the Marshal's no longer liable to be able to get George of Clarence, and that means someone else who went like Holland and got close is actually the more powerful option to go grab it. So he's going to do that. Okay, and so he moved up to Cardigan, an open town which you can just walk in, and we mark it with the royal counter on his card. Now that's actually got a slight advantage in the advanced combat system too. It gives him odds shift in every battle he's in. And we move Howard up to Hereford so that they can kind of get together. And well, oh, did I have something? No. I got to keep an eye on that. Okay, these are Scottish mercenaries. Yes, beautiful artwork. This is a card that has to be homemade. It was suggested in the variants thing as an addition to the French mercenaries. Basically, you have to go up to Scotland to play these. Alright, and now we'll start with some of the other powers and see what happens. Well, another kind of event card, mercenaries go home, Burgundian crossbowmen. That's just bad. You know, you got these Burgundians, well, they're gone. And your troop strength is less. It's one of the weaknesses to using mercenaries. And they go under the deck for a reshuffle. Okay, jumping to just the next player. Started gathering some troops. I've got a lot of disparate leaders, and I just played Cromwell. And I really kind of want to get them together because scattered as they were, they don't do any good. I've also got the Duke of Norfolk who's sieging this. To resolve the siege, he draws a card. He gets a victory. It works. Now, I have to make a roll. He's the larger force. On a 2, he's killed, which would be very bad. That's not the case. And now, he has captured Harlech Castle, which isn't really worth anything. And we can put him here. He can run back inside, which is one reason I don't really like keeping people in cities, I think. Right? I think in combat, you can run inside. I don't know, I have to look. Because somehow I remember having to sit in cities to be safe. Anyway, he's very safe being within range of Conway right now. So I'm not too worried about that. But I got to think about it with others, whether or not, you know, so for example, he's in Hereford. How do I mark that? Well, one way would be to drop a marker on top, but that looks like it's ownership, so that's kind of less useful. I don't know. I'll do that. And likewise, Holland is actually in Cardigan as well. And I'll use those to indicate being inside, because otherwise they're available to be hit in a field battle. And you could say the same with the castles, though, and it's just hard to indicate where someone is on this really tiny map, especially given how irregular it is. Okay, well now the game's beginning on the third player of the second turn to take the ugly turn of events. A French raid came down. Holland was pulled down to Compton. He's now inside there. But here's the problem. Berkeley here has 190 troops right near him. Oh, speaking of which, oh no, he wasn't affected. Okay. Holland only has 100. Now, Holland is safe from siege, but he can't come out if Berkeley moves here. And they could cut some sort of deal to allow Holland out. But until they do, he can't leave. And possibly it could be, you know, some troops. Maybe even just the Scottish mercenaries, which aren't terribly valuable. But anyway, I'm just trying to give you a feel here. If he had a few more troops, 100 more troops, because there's 100 troops in the castle and 100 troops with Holland, then it would be a different situation. Because, and it doesn't have to be many, he's at 190, he's 10 off, which means if he draws a mercenary, he can lay siege. What changes then is that he can lay siege and will eventually probably capture Holland. And that's a bad thing, and Holland might actually want a field battle even at bad odds, rather than be holed up with his own one big noble, because he will have to pay. He has nothing here except the royal heir to give away, and what he's got here might be valuable, but he kind of doesn't want to give away the Chamberlain of Chester. Well, a bit of luck for Beaufort here. We see Neville, the marshal, gathering all his forces. He's like 10 strength points under what he needs to siege either Margaret or Edward. London is a big city. With a strength of 300 base. London, York, Bristol, and Norwich. Most of these castles and things have a strength of 200, which he's just about at the point to siege. Sieging cities, castles not so much, although just owning them for tactical reasons is useful. But sieging cities is useful because they provide you votes in the House of Commons. And it's kind of one of the reasons you'll see, for example, the Duke of Somerset, who got lucky because he didn't get this plague. He was sitting outside Bristol, which he could have gone in. He owns it. Sieging these cities and locations becomes kind of important when you're a territorial lord, because what else can you do within your territory? So when he goes up here, he's going to see, Newcastle, I can take that, and I can take Carlisle, and I can add to my vote total. And I can also take Durham, but the problem is when the Bishop of Durham shows up, I believe, I'm not positive of that, that the card may trigger, oh, that's the wrong one. There's wherever they give troops for the cities, that's here. That they talk about it. Yeah, that the card will give the troop this location back. I'm not sure which way that goes. I think if you've actually captured the location, you can't play the card for that. But if you retake it and you have that card, you can play it, and then you get the city troops if that's the case. That's how I'm going to play it. Basically, you can't capture a location by playing a card. You have to, and I didn't always play it this way, you have to actually take the location. And then you might get the bonus of the city card. Those are cities that have additional troops. City cards become pretty valueless in general because eventually the major players are able to take cities pretty easily. Alright, one last player for this round. Okay, well, after a couple more actions and, again, the marshal getting called around. This is the problem with being the marshal. You get 100 troops everywhere, but you got to be everywhere. We've moved on here, and we got one of these event cards. This is one of the ones that kind of can shake things up. Embassy from the Emperor, King to Ravenzer. This only works if there's a single king. He goes up here. He's just loose. Somebody can go grab him. Now, Bourchier and Berkeley. Well, Berkeley's tied up here. Bourchier is too far away, but we'll get to people kind of charging over there to try to grab him and get him someplace safe, because he's important. People will fight to grab him. And the marshal gathered his forces moving up there. We can see the guy who drew it put Bourchier here on the chance that maybe he'll get lucky and be able to slip in there, but he doesn't want to be out in the open with the troops that are out there, because somebody will just slam him probably with something like this at risk. By the way, these guys picked up something very valuable. The other Archbishop, very powerful. That'll give him York. So in the very least, he can go up there, claim Richard, and have the other side of the Plantagenet family. And that means both of these cards are going to come into play very soon, because once you control the head of the house, you get that. Anyway, the reason I came in here was the event card was a vacillating noble. It got played on Herbert. That means Herbert can't move this turn. Now, these can come up in combat, and they cause kind of a betrayal effect, which is really cool, because that's such a big part of what happened in some of the battles during the War of the Roses. Is, you had a civil war, but people weren't terribly committed. It's just one noble faction or another, so it was very easy for a noble to be sort of swayed into joining the other faction. Anyway, what this means in this case is he just can't move Herbert, who's, I don't know, it's hard to find people in this game. So he's going to be stuck out here in the open, which is kind of dangerous. Anyway. And Greystoke managed to run down and grab the king. That gives him the Duke of Lancaster and the Castle of Windsor. So he's going to get this. The Duke of Lancaster card is kind of important, not so much at this point in the game. I mean, he's an extra noble. He's got a title. You can give him a job like that. And he's a lot of extra troops that you have on your side. But here's the thing that becomes really interesting, is late in the game, and even now, you can essentially throw him into a battle, lose those forces, and you regenerate them. So if he gets killed, he can run off, try to assassinate people, try to stomp on forces that actually outnumber him, just in the hope of killing something. That becomes sort of a low-risk attack, because he just keeps regenerating. Anyway, we're back up around the top. He's got some slight problems, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, unless there's like a forced march or something, the Earl of Warwick is not going to be able to reach him. So he's judging that even with tiny Greystoke, well, not tiny, but his fairly small faction, he's just become a much more powerful force in the game by grabbing Henry. We'll see what he can do with this. And at this moment, we draw a Parliament must be summoned if there is no Soul King. Well, there is a Soul King, but this is a card that you really have to kind of know the components situation here. In particular, if Henry is the Soul King, he's having a crisis of madness. And that means that Parliament must be summoned. It's summoned immediately, and the player who drew the card chooses. And that's this guy over here. He's not under siege yet. He's just being kind of blockaded. So I can kind of choose wherever I want to hold it near my power base. Now, I don't have really a power base, but the Bishop of Carlisle gives me 30 troops north of Trent. It's hard to remember. I've got to peek at every bishop, because some of them only give north of the T's, like one of them. So what that's going to mean is I probably want to summon it somewhere near me. Now what happens is there's sort of this truce period after a parliament. I don't remember quite how far it extends. But you don't want to you've got to be careful as to where you're going to be so that you have someplace safe to run to after the parliament. And you maybe don't want to block out an area, because I think it extends more than one area, that you have some reason that you want to fight in. Alright. I'll come back and we'll handle the parliament, and that'll probably be the end of this video, because parliaments are kinda rich. Okay, now everybody gathered at Parliament, which was decided to be held at Preston. The main reason for this may not be that they hope to get anything. So for example, this guy actually threw votes down in the hope of preventing this Parliament from serving any purpose, largely. He's hoping to block things because he's got a pretty good idea what's in there, and he didn't remember any titles going in there, and he needs a title to get a job. The only exception would be if there's a job he'd like better than Chancellor of Cornwall, but Chancellor of Cornwall is a pretty decent job. What I had to do was count up the votes, and the way I do this is I set up the different factions. I count up the town votes first, or maybe not first, but whatever. I actually did the lords first. But we'll look at the chart this way. And what you have to do this is look under every counter for that faction, and for every town they have, they get 3 votes. For every city, like London or Bristol, that they have, there's only 4 of these, they get 4 votes. Those are going to count for the House of Commons. Okay. Then the second thing to do is to go through the rest of this chart, which essentially is looking on these cards, and you count the commons votes on the titles and on the nobles themselves, and sometimes on the jobs. You can't count the ones that are on the cards, though. You've already counted those by looking through the board. The problem, and the reason you can't just deal with the cards, is that some of these jobs, for example, Cornwall, come with towns. And those commons votes aren't addressed in the cards, and they can also be separated from the cards. So there's kind of an issue in terms of, hey, you know, the cards for the cities end up just being a sign of which noble in the advanced game, if he, well, in any game, but in the advanced game, the cities are all always assigned, and towns are always assigned to a particular noble. Which city that a particular noble has ownership of, and if he dies, well, that town goes away from his hands, from his faction, goes back into the deck, actually. And he loses control of it in that case. Okay, so where are we? And this is kind of a problem, because things like Chancellor of Cornwall probably should have their own cards to represent those towns, and those should be subtracted from the strength points on the cards. And this could actually be significantly better addressed, but hey, you know, it's okay to have the missing cards and just handle it the way that kind of happens. Okay. And I'm sure that didn't make a lot of sense unless you're really familiar with the game already, and even then probably came close. So the next thing that I can count is the House of Lords, which is the easiest. I just look on the cards, but there's 10 extra points for having the senior Lancaster or York. Well, Henry, even though he's insane, is still the senior Lancaster, and he is worth 10 points there. And you'll see that the Moon has a significant amount of House of Lords votes. Of course, Gate has more with those archbishops. They're a huge value. Now, for House of Commons, in general, you add the town votes to the votes on the cards, and then 10 for Senior Lancaster and York. So again, the Moon got a significant amount of votes at 21, even though he doesn't have a powerful-looking faction, just because he has that Senior Lancastrian. But because of this card, we don't follow the normal rules. The normal rules would be the sole king would get 20 extra votes in the House of Commons. That doesn't quite happen. Instead, and if there's no sole king, normally the chancellor summons the parliament. He gets those 20 extra votes. But this particular card is kind of an emergency situation. It appears, although I'm not certain, that it actually kind of may short circuit the chancellor's power and get rid of it. I'm not sure which way I lean on that. I know I used to always give the chancellor the power, his 20 votes. But in this particular case, there is no chancellor anyway. And there is a specific mechanism for determining who's going to get those 20 votes under this card, and I think I'm going to play with that for this game, which is you add the commons and lords without it, whoever has the most, and in this case it's barely Moon. He had 34 votes to 33 for Gate over here, the other big power. He gets 20 extra votes in the House of Commons, as though he owns the king. Well, he does own the king. Yeah. Anyway, that's what we're going to have for votes. I'll total up these amounts, and then I'll start cutting deals. Now, this isn't completely what you'd see in an actual physical game with people playing, because honestly, I threw down all my votes that I want to throw down. It's quite possible. Now, for this, to get this extra 20 points, you had to do that. But it's quite possible for votes to be added during the negotiations, etc., with kind of a, okay, let's do this. Well, now, the person who summoned it, by this random act, essentially, normally it would be the king or the chancellor, gets to draw a number of cards equal to the number of nobles who attended. Well, everybody attended, so this parliament has a lot of agreement. And now he can assign these three positions and try to come up with some kind of deal that'll make him work. Now, he's not really in a position where he wants any of this, except maybe the Warden of the Cinque Ports. He could get rid of the Treasury of England in exchange for that. It's a more powerful position. So maybe he'd take that. But unless somebody has, which they very seldomly will, held back on, say, a title that they can play on Howard, or give to him to play on Howard, he doesn't have a lot to gain by having this parliament be successful. Luckily for everyone else, though, he's not got the only choice. After him, we go to the person with the largest total of votes in both houses, which is definitely going to be Moon. He had it before that 20 extra votes. Then it goes to the person with the second largest total vote, which drops down to Gate. And then the person who controls the most total town votes, which is again Gate. So each person in turn gets a chance to vote through a deal. And there can be negotiation, discussion, and trades and stuff like that before that. I'll probably just come back and show you what actually transpired. Well, there's always an opportunity for betrayal in a parliament, but this early in the game seems like a really dumb time to make some big enemies. There's a lot of randomness still available with the deck, etc. You really don't want to make a lifelong enemy in the game at this point. A coalition was formed, and it didn't turn out quite how I expected it to. Greystoke was willing to accept the constableship of Dover Castle. He wanted to assign the Warden of the Cinque Ports over to Suffolk or Scrope, and the Lieutenant of Ireland over to Fitzalan. He would have actually rather given it to Percy, but his son was like, nah, I'm not willing to join your coalition to take what I see as a penalty. But it turned out that Suffolk actually wanted the Lieutenant of Ireland more for some reason, I'm not sure why, and agreed to the deal, and it ended up going with the Warden of the Cinque Ports going to Arundel. I'm not sure that should have happened. I think Moon probably should have demanded the Cinque Ports. That was sort of the bonus piece that he was willing to give to the weakest of the three powers as far as he's concerned with Acorn. But that throws a lot more votes over to Sun, and I'm not sure Sun or Acorn would have accepted those 5 extra commons votes to someone who already has a fairly powerful stance there. They want to keep things kind of balanced. At this point, everybody gets the option to go home. I doubt many are going to. A lot of people just showed up here for the simple reason, and and I'm going to leave this up so that I know on his next turn it goes away. For the simple reason that they wanted to gather their forces. The piece is only in this space itself, though, so getting out could be kind of dangerous, and some people may have second thoughts. I'll put them back. But I'm going to load this up right now because it's a long video as it stands.